Charles Oliveira versus Mateusz Gamrot is officially booked in October for the UFC Rio fight night. Mateusz Gamrot is the fighter who replaced Rafael Fiziev, who pulled out due to injury. And in this video, we're going to break down the fight, give a prediction for who will win this fight, as well as what this means for the rest of the lightweight division and the title picture. So watch to the end to make sure you guys get all of that info, but let's get right into this video. So we found out last week that Rafael Fiziev was pulling out of the UFC Rio fight night against Charles Oliveira due to injury. And this is real unfortunate because this was going to be a banger fight. It was likely that both fighters were going to fight on the feet and we were going to see a knockout. Rafael Fiziev is a high-level kickboxer for those of you who don't know him. But sadly he is injured again, which sucks even more because he was sidelined recently for over a year and a half because he was injured before that. So this is seeming to be a thing that is riddling his UFC career, which is always unfortunate to see, especially with these entertaining fighters. But we do have Gamrot who is hopping in the fight, and we were worried that this fight was going to be canceled and we weren't going to get anybody because for today's Herrick Insider News, a little more context to this whole situation after Rafael pulled out was that Charles Oliveira, this fight was being offered to many other people, and Charles was calling all the people out who weren't taking the fight, saying that they were making whatever excuse they could think of to not take the fight. But then Mateusz Gamrot wanted the fight, and then Charles Oliveira started complaining that Charles was training for a striker and now this is a wrestler and it's just way different than what he was training for, so he didn't want this fight. And a lot of people were quick to call him out on social media. I know MMA Guru made a video, and as well as a bunch of other people, even Mateusz Gamrot was taken to social media making fun of Oliveira. And who knows, maybe this all got to him, maybe he just changed his mind, but he took the fight, so respect to Charles Oliveira, and this fight is going to happen just a few weeks from now. Oh, and this fight just got announced literally a few minutes ago, so if you guys want to do a huge favor to get all the UFC news the quickest way possible, you could hit subscribe and click that bell button so that you get all the breaking news as soon as it happens, as well as other high quality UFC uploads throughout the week, and you can join our great community. But carrying on with this video, let's look at Mateusz Gamrot's recent UFC history. He is 8-3 in the UFC with a random win over somebody earlier this year, but he has other notable wins in his career against Jalen Turner, Rafael Fiziev, Dos Anjos, and even Arman Tsarukyan. Yes, that is an impressive win, but it was a very close fight. Some people say it was a robbery. Nonetheless, he did beat Arman, which is impressive because Arman beats most of the fighters he goes up against. But Gamrot has a pretty boring style of wrestling. Even though a lot of people recognize that he is a very good fighter, one of the best wrestlers in the UFC, he has a very boring style to watch, and a lot of fighters do duck him because of how good at wrestling he is. So he has trouble finding fights from time to time, which is unfortunate for him, but it's just kind of the way the UFC is going these days, which is unfortunate for a lot of guys. I mean, you see this with guys like Shavkat and Khamzat Chimaev. People have been ducking them in the past, and it's been hard for them to get fights. But we'll carry on to Charles Oliveira history. We all know who he is. He had the crazy winning streak, became champion after a shaky start in the UFC, but in his last 6 fights, he is only 3-3. Albeit, this is against the best fighters in the UFC, so it's not like he's losing to scrubs. Every single fight he's lost has been to great fighters like Islam Makhachev or Ilia Topuria. Like, you can't really fault him that much for losing at him. However, the one worry is that he lost to Ilia Topuria by a brutal knockout back in June at UFC 317, and he's making a turnaround less than 4 months later against Mateusz Gamrot, who is a high-level fighter in the style that he was not training for. But right before I give you guys the prediction on who I think will win this fight, as well as a breakdown of why, let's talk about what this means for the rest of the UFC lightweight division, including the champion, Ilia Topuria. So we have Ilia right now as champion with no fight news. I made a video on this whole situation the other week, so you could go check that out if you'd like to. But a quick breakdown, it is looking like Arman Tsarukyan versus Dan Hooker was going to happen in November, and that could have been a #1 contenders fight, or that could have been another contender fighting Ilia Topuria. But in the last 2 weeks, this news has gone radio silent, and we have no updates on Arman Tsarukyan's next fight. And instead, he's fighting old guys in grappling matches. It's like, what are we doing here? Anything but a UFC fight. It's been almost a year and a half since Arman Tsarukyan has fought in the UFC, and it's really hard to say that he's a #1 contender right now with that inactivity. But my thought is they're going to have Ilia Topuria fight somebody. We don't know who that is, but he's going to fight somebody in January. I think that this will be the first big event that they do on their Paramount deal, and they want to start it off with a bang. And there's nobody better to do that with than Ilia Topuria. But for the Charles versus Gamrot fight, I think whoever wins this fight still will need one more win before they get a title shot, just because we already have 3 good contenders in Justin Gaethje, Paddy Pimblett, and Arman Tsarukyan. There's going to be a bit of a logjam at the top before a Charles Oliveira or Mateusz Gamrot could get another title shot. And I think whoever loses this fight probably just goes on to fight randoms in this division or maybe retires. We will touch more closely on this later in the video, so stay tuned to see who I think each fighter will face next based on if they win or lose this fight in October. But you guys have all been waiting for this prediction. So looking at this prediction, I think that Charles Oliveira will win this fight because He is the higher level fighter. He is the higher level all-time fighter, and he is the higher level striker. And Charles Oliveira grappling is no joke either. I mean, he has the most submissions in UFC history. But looking at him, Charles Oliveira has been a more active fighter than Mateusz Gamrot. He's not going to be as rusty in that octagon. Not that Mateusz is, because he fought recently, but Charles is in great fight shape, great 5-round shape. He's been fighting all the time. He's going to be ready for this. And the opponents that Charles Oliveira has been fighting are way better than Mateusz Gamrot's opponent. The level of competition is just not comparable here. I mean, he's fighting guys like Islam Makhachev, Ilia Topuria. Like, these are way better than any guys that Mateusz Gamrot has been fighting recently in the UFC. People are going to say, oh, Charles out of his prime, he's so old. Let me tell you, they're only 1 year apart in age difference. So it is not as bad as it seems. One's 34, one's 35. It's basically the same age at this point. And that is the argument that I wanted to make to you guys for Charles Oliveira winning this fight. However, it is not my honest prediction on who I think will win this fight. I do think that Mateusz Gamrot comes out on top on this one, and it is because he is a much better wrestler than Charles Oliveira. I mean, we've seen Charles Oliveira get out-wrestled by Islam Makhachev, a little bit by Ilia Topuria, and by Arman Tsarukyan at this point. So for all of that to happen, I think it would be reasonable to say that Mateusz Gamrot could do the same to Charles Oliveira. I mean, we saw Arman Tsarukyan totally nullify Charles. I know he almost got choked out once or twice, but Mateusz Gamrot's a very comparable level of wrestler, and I think he could get the job done against Charles, who is coming off of a loss and has not been looking as good as he used to in recent UFC history. Charles is also coming back very quickly after a brutal KO, and he's getting older, so he could be more chinny, more likely to get knocked out. However, we know that's not Mateusz Gamrot's style. He's going to wrestle you, and Mateusz has even come out on social media and interviews saying that he wants to dominate Charles Oliveira on the ground. So I don't really think that Mateusz will get a knockout. However, it is more likely to happen now after Charles Oliveira coming back quickly off of a knockout than it would be otherwise. So it's always something worth mentioning. But I do think Mateusz Gamrot, as my official prediction very early, I guess not early since it's only a few weeks away now, but I think he will get a decision win, maybe split decision. I think a lot of people will be unhappy with this, and he will not get a title shot afterwards because it will not be very impressive. It'll be no hype for a fight with Ilia. I mean, I would rather see any of the other 3 contenders fight Ilia than Mateusz Gamrot coming off of a boring wrestling win. However, if he does get a cool knockout, then you could do him versus Ilia, and that would be a hyped up fight, and it'd be cool to watch. But I think it'll be a boring win, and then I think he'll fight someone like Max Holloway next, or maybe Paddy Pimblett, and then the winner of that fight, no matter what, can fight Ilia, or whoever the lightweight champion is at that time. But if Charles wins, I think he also needs a fight against Max Holloway or a Paddy Pimblett, and then you could give the winner of that a title shot. However, if Charles beats Gamrot, I don't think that he beats his next opponent, as it would be one of the best lightweights in the world, probably in someone like Paddy Pimblett or Max Holloway for a #1 contenders fight. And Charles Oliveira will be 36, out of his prime at that point, and I think he would just lose to either of those fighters in their prime at the top of the lightweight division. Sadly, I think this is the end for Charles Oliveira's title hopes in the UFC. I think 170 is too good, and there's no way he goes back down to 145 at this age. So sadly, I think that is a wrap for Drew Bronx being a UFC champion. And again, if Gamrot wins, I think it'll be by decision, and he's got to fight Holloway or Paddy Pimblett or another top contender, and then you could give him a title shot, which is very possible for him to win these fights. However, I think it will most likely be by boring wrestling, which, you know, you can't deny him title shots if he's going to keep winning, but he does still need a win after this one, given that he's not been super active and not been winning a lot recently in the UFC. And if Gamrot loses, I think he just goes back to fighting whoever in the UFC. I think you pair him up against someone like Moicano or Beneil Dariush, and then just call it a day, have them figure it out. One can move up, one can move down in the rankings. But not a title elimination bout, not a #1 contender bout, just a normal fight in your rankings. Still matters, but not for the title picture yet. But that is it. That is the quick update, the breaking news that I had to get to you guys, and all I ask in return is that you like the video if you like the video, and hit subscribe if you want to see great UFC videos multiple times a week, and join our community down below in the comments. But with that being said, I will see you guys in the next video later this week. Deuces.